Hello, today you will be able to hear the story of a man from Reddit. Listen as carefully as possible. Hello, Reddit. I had always believed that marriage was a union of trust, love, and mutual respect. But now, looking at Catherine, who stood in front of me with a cold expression, I realized that I was blind. We had lived together for 10 years. 10 years during which I gave her everything, my love, my money, my youth. Catherine was everything to me, a woman I trusted more than myself. I worked myself to the bone to provide us with a carefree life, turning a blind eye to her whims, expensive purchases, and frequent business trips. But now everything has fallen into place. I learned the truth by accident. That evening I came home earlier than usual. It was dark in the living room, but I heard voices. Her voice and another man's, low and confident. I froze in the hallway, feeling my blood run cold. "You have to divorce him," the stranger said. "He won't sign it," Catherine replied. "He's not the idiot he seems to be." I clenched my fists, digging my nails into my palms as I listened to them talk. "Then just stall for time. Or, there's another option, and you know what it is." "No," her voice broke into a whisper, "it's too risky." The man laughed. "Well, then, we'll have to wait." I took a step back, trying to comprehend what I had heard. They want me to sign the divorce, but they know I won't. And there is another option that she is afraid to even talk about. The next day I went to a lawyer. I needed to know what the consequences of a divorce would be. And that's when I learned the most important thing. "Your wife is the main beneficiary of your insurance policy," the lawyer said, looking through the documents. "If something happens to you, she will get several million." These words hit me harder than any punch in a street fight. Catherine hadn't just betrayed me, she was waiting for me to die. And maybe not just waiting. She didn't delay the divorce because she didn't want a scandal. She was just waiting for the right moment. But if she thinks I'm that stupid, she doesn't know who she's dealing with. I wasn't going to play by her rules. If she wanted to kill me for money, I would be the first to put her in a position where she would regret every step she took. I have always considered myself a calm person. The kind of person who doesn't give in to emotions, who makes decisions with a cold mind. But when I learned the truth about Catherine, my blood boiled. A betrayal? I could live with that. I hated the thought of her being with another man, of that man touching her, of her whispering to him what she had once said to me. But the betrayal was only the first knife in the back. The worst was yet to come. She wanted me dead. She lived next to me, smiled, pretended to love me, and at the same time planned how to get millions after my death. How many times did she lie next to me in bed with her head on my chest and think, "When are you going to die?" I imagined her calmly waiting for me to die. Maybe she was already considering her options? An accident? A heart attack? Or maybe she just wanted to poison me and watch me suffocate in my death throes? Thinking back to all those evenings when she brought me coffee or made me dinner, I almost smashed my fist into the mirror. Damn it, I trusted her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break into her house, grab her by the throat and make her confess. I wanted to smash all her stupid expensive jewelry, throw her things out into the street, and kick her out like a stray dog. But I didn't do it. Because I realized that I could do much worse. I would not give her the pleasure of seeing my weakness. I will not show her that I know the truth. If she thinks she can play this game, great. But she doesn't even realize that I'm already setting a trap. Her biggest mistake? She underestimated me. If you saw me the day after I found out the truth, you would think nothing had changed. I still went to work, said hello to my colleagues, made my morning coffee. When I got home, I kissed Catherine on the cheek as usual. We had dinner together, talked about everyday things, and even before going to bed, she put her head on my chest, as she had done hundreds of times. But inside me, rage was boiling. Now her every look, every word, every touch seemed fake to me. She had betrayed me. She was waiting for me to die. And at the same time she skillfully played the role of a loving wife. I remembered how I used to catch her thoughtful gaze when she looked at me at breakfast. Back then, I thought she was just lost in thought. But now I realized that she was probably calculating how much more she would have to endure before I disappeared from her life. And now I had to play my part. I couldn't give her a reason to suspect that I knew something. If I start to get nervous, rude to her, avoid her, or, on the contrary, suddenly become too affectionate, she might realize that something is wrong. This means that her plans will change, and I won't be able to predict them. That's why I became the perfect husband. Every morning, I would wake up a little earlier and prepare breakfast for us. I would bring her coffee in bed, look into her eyes and smile like an unsuspecting fool. "It's so good to have you," I would tell her when she would stretch and take the cup from my hands. I saw her shudder. There was a shadow of doubt in her eyes, but she quickly composed herself. I started complimenting her more often, giving her flowers for no reason. She didn't know how to react. She was used to me taking her for granted, and now she suddenly felt like a queen. But most importantly, I began to watch her closely. I noticed when she goes to the bathroom with her phone, when she receives a message and smiles, looking down. I saw how she hid her laughter when she read something on her phone. I pretended that it didn't bother me. But in reality, I was carefully memorizing everything: when she left the house, how long she was gone, what mood she was in when she came back. I knew she was dating that bastard. And I knew I needed to find out more. So the next time she said she was going to meet her friends, I decided to check her out. I gave her a 15-minute head start, then got in my car and followed. And, damn it, I had to stop myself from killing her on the spot. She was sitting in a restaurant with the man I already knew. They were laughing, leaning into each other, she was touching his arm, and he was looking at her as if she was his whole world. I stood nearby, watching my loving wife flirt with her lover. My fists were clenching, but I didn't make a single sudden movement. This game was just beginning. If she thinks that I will just silently accept her betrayal and become another victim of her plan, she is very wrong. I got home a few minutes before she did. I even had time to pour myself a whiskey and pretend to be relaxed watching TV. In reality, a flame of rage was raging inside me. I already knew the truth. I had seen it with my own eyes. But that was not enough. I wanted to hear her lie to my face. I wanted to see how good she was at pretending. A few minutes later, the lock clicked in the door. She entered the house, kicked off her shoes as usual, and walked into the living room, holding a small handbag. "Oh, you're still up," she was surprised. "I was waiting for you." I took a sip of whiskey and looked at her as if I didn't suspect anything. Catherine walked past me and leaned over to kiss me on the cheek. It was at that moment that I smelled it, a faint but distinct scent of men's perfume. I waited until she pulled away and calmly asked, "Why do you smell like men's perfume?" I spoke in an even tone on purpose. Without accusation. No aggression. Just a calm, seemingly innocent question. And at that moment I saw what I wanted. Her eyes widened for a moment. It was a brief flash of panic. She had not expected such a question. Her brain was frantically searching for an excuse. But she quickly pulled herself together. "Oh," she made a playful face and waved her hand. "It must have been from someone at the restaurant. There were a lot of people there, you know, when you pass someone, the aromas remain." She had thought of everything. Just a few seconds and her voice was light again. I nodded, pretending to accept her answer. "It makes sense," I said. But I didn't stop. "By the way, how are your friends?" I saw her tense up. "Just a little, almost imperceptibly." "Good," she replied, unclasping her bracelet. "We had such a great time. We talked and drank wine." I kept watching. "Where exactly did you sit?" "In that little cafe on Baker Street," she answered without hesitation. Oh, how easily she lies. I pretended I wasn't interested anymore and changed the subject. She relaxed, thinking her ruse had worked. But that evening I was once again convinced that I was already dead in her eyes. And if she thinks she can get rid of me, she knows me even worse than I thought. I didn't sleep at night anymore. I would lie next to Catherine, feeling her steady breathing, and stare into the darkness until my thoughts drove me to madness. How had I not noticed this before? How could I live next to a woman who not only betrayed me, but also planned my death? I tried to sleep, tried to force myself not to think, but every time my eyelids closed, the same picture came to mind: Catherine in the restaurant, her smile, her hand on the man's wrist, the twinkle in her eye that she hadn't shown me in a long time. And then the insurance documents. Her signature. Her plan. And the thought made me physically ill. I turned my head and looked at her. She was sleeping calmly, relaxed. Like a person who has no worries. And me? I was lying in that bed, knowing that there was a snake next to me, waiting for the moment to bite me in the throat. Every night I could feel my body tense, my fingers clenching the sheet. Sometimes I just wanted to get up, throw her out of that bed, turn on the light, and scream in her face. I know what you did. I know what you're up to. But I held back. I couldn't reveal myself. Not now. I turned on my back, looked at the ceiling, and waited for the dawn, for her to wake up, pretend we were still the perfect couple, and start a new day. My hatred for her grew with each passing night. And I swore to myself that if she decided to play this game, I would see it through to the end. Only I would make the rules. I knew they would meet again. Catherine thought she was smarter than me, that her lies were so perfect that I would never guess. But I saw all her little clues. All I had to do was look a little closer at her behavior. That day, she started getting ready in the evening, just like the last time. She spent a long time choosing a dress, carefully selecting perfume. I was sitting in an armchair watching her, pretending to read a book. "Where are you going to have dinner tonight?" I asked, barely hiding my sly smile. "Oh, I told you, with the girls," she replied, not taking her eyes off the mirror. "We're meeting again at Riverside." "That's great." I was sure she was going to go there again. When she left, I took my time. I gave her some time to feel safe. Then, dressed in my favorite dark suit, I called a taxi and followed. Riverside was not just a restaurant. It was a place for romantic dinners, with live music playing and the aroma of expensive wines and perfumes in the air. I walked into the room, confidently walking to the receptionist. "One table, please, somewhere cozy," I said, showing no emotion. The waiter led me to the corner of the room, where the other tables were clearly visible. And there they were. Catherine was sitting with her back to me, but I would have recognized her even among 100 people. She leaned closer to the man across from her, whispering something in his ear, smiling her false smile. And he? Tall, athletic, with an expensive watch on his wrist. His hand was on the table next to hers, almost touching. I watched them as if I were watching a play where I already knew the ending. They ordered a bottle of wine. She was laughing, touching her hair, demonstrating all her well-practiced movements. She was an actress who played the role of a woman in love, but today she did not even realize that her most important audience was sitting just a few meters away. I took a sip of my drink and thought, I wonder how she would react if I just got up and walked over to them. But I held back. The game had just begun. And I was going to win it by all the rules. I couldn't take my eyes off them. They were sitting in a restaurant, laughing, drinking expensive wine. I followed her every move, every change in her facial expressions. She was a perfect actress, playing the role of a woman who fell in love for the first time. She tilted her head as if she was engrossed in a conversation, bit her lip, and gave him glances that once belonged only to me. She was no longer mine. This thought kept running through my head, and my anger grew with it. I kept myself in check. I calmly finished my meal and took a few more sips of whiskey. But when they got up from the table and headed for the exit, I had no right to stay away. I threw the bills on the table and quietly followed them, taking my time. They went outside, the wind blowing her hair. She laughed when he whispered something in her ear, and it finished me off. If I don't pull myself together now, I'm going to kill them. But that was not my plan. I pretended to just go on my way. I walked past them without attracting attention. But when I turned the corner, I stopped abruptly and stood around the corner of the building. They were standing by his car. "Are you sure?" he asked, running his hand down her back. "Yes," she answered, as if it were nothing. "He's asleep. I left the car at the restaurant." He leaned down and kissed her. Calmly, confidently. And she returned the kiss like she hadn't kissed me in a long time. It seemed to me that the ground had left under my feet. I clenched my fists so hard that my nails dug into my skin. She was lying to my face, sleeping next to me, playing the role of a wife, but in reality, He opened the car door for her, and they got in. The car moved off. No, bitch, I'm not going to let this go. I quickly stopped the taxi and told the driver to keep his distance from the black Mercedes in front of him. The car drove across the city until it turned into one of those streets reserved for couples in love who wanted to be alone. I knew this place. We had come here ourselves a long time ago. The same scenario again. They came out, he opened the door for her, they laughed, joked, and then I saw him press her against the hood of the car. His hands slid down her body. You wanted a divorce, didn't you, Catherine? Why didn't you tell me you'd made your choice a long time ago? My anger had reached a boiling point. I could have gotten out of the car right now, walked up to him, pulled him off and smashed his face into the hood. I could have done anything I wanted. But I didn't. I slowly took out my phone and pointed the camera. Congratulations, darling. Your show is over. She was always stubborn. She always thought that she could get out of any situation, that I wouldn't be able to find out about her little secrets. But I knew very well that she had no idea what I was capable of when it came to the truth. And although I realized that it would be best for her to leave it all in the past without revealing her cards, I was calm. My revenge was in the process of being played out. And now I decided to take my next step. I called the restaurant where he often went. I made an appointment for the three of us, me, Catherine, and her friends. I knew she wouldn't say no. She doesn't like to turn down invitations to expensive dinners. It was her weakness, her love of luxury, of moments when she is surrounded by comfort and attention. When I told her I wanted to invite her and her closest friends to dinner at Riverside, her eyes sparkled with joy. Oh, that's great, she said, I was just about to share the latest news with my friends. Her friends came on time, all in a good mood. I sat at the table, smiling calmly, looking into each of their faces. Catherine was whispering something to her friends, laughing with them as if there were no horrible lies she was telling day after day. I listened intently, but it seemed as if they didn't notice that I was there. I was here for someone else. I endured a few minutes of silence before, seemingly by accident, I asked. Yes, I wonder how you enjoyed your last visit to this restaurant. You were here recently, I believe? I mean, you and your lover. I looked at Catherine, feeling her confusion, which quickly changed to a nervous look. I saw her hand tremble as she grabbed the wine glass. She looked down, trying to hide her reaction. Oh, it was wonderful, she tried to smile, but it was obviously a lie. It was a great place, everything was just perfect. I didn't stop. Maybe you want to tell your friends how you and your lover spent your time? They've been wanting to hear the details for a long time. I looked at her, and my patience seemed to be running out. She fell silent. Her friends also looked confused. Silence filled the room. And at that moment I realized that my game with her was just beginning. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. I sat at the table, calmly watching Catherine as she tried to maintain the appearance of a carefree woman. Her eyes no longer had the confident sparkle I had seen before. Instead, I saw fear, and it was exactly what I had been waiting for. I was silent for a moment, letting her feel the gravity of this situation, and then, leaning back, I decided to ask her one last question that would rock her world. You didn't answer my question, Catherine, I said, as if I didn't care, as if I were just curious. How did you feel about him the next time you met him in that restaurant? You haven't forgotten how the smell of a man's cologne lingered on your body, have you? Tears were welling up in her eyes. She tried to keep her cool, but it was no longer possible. Her friends sat in silence, not knowing what to say. This was not just a conversation, it was a game in which her role was ending. I had collected all the cards, and now I was ready to reveal them. You lied to my face, I said, pausing, and now everything has become obvious. I know where you were and with whom. I know how you spent your time together while I sat at home waiting for your tricks. She threw her head back, and her shoulders trembled. I could see her trying to keep control, but in that silence, everything was already clear. It's not what you think, she began, but I already knew she couldn't win now. I pulled out my phone, which had been quietly working all this time. And without saying another word, I showed her the video I had recorded the night they met. I recorded their movements, their kisses, how she clung to him, forgetting everything around her. It was her verdict. And when she saw it, she couldn't say anything else. She just lowered her head and closed her eyes. Her friends watched the video in amazement, not knowing what to say. They probably also knew it was the end. The end of her performance that had gone on for so long without me knowing anything. I looked up and my eyes met hers again. They were full of tears and anger, but they could not change anything. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Did you think that everything would go without consequences? I asked, my voice calm, but a storm was raging inside me. It was you, Catherine, who was so stupid to think that I wouldn't understand your games. She was silent, her face contorted with shame and guilt. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, but at that moment it didn't matter. Everything was over. All the cards were revealed. We returned home after that evening. The restaurant was left behind, but the shadow of that conversation never left us. I felt like every step brought us closer to the end of this story. She walked beside me, silently, her eyes were empty, and I already knew that her world was falling apart like a house of cards. When we got into the house, I locked the door and stood by it, watching her take off her coat. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't look up at me. All these years, when I was the one waiting for her to come back, when I believed in her words, it seemed like it was all in vain. I couldn't let go of the image that remained in my head, her with him, her kisses, her laughter, her tenderness. It all made no sense, and I was going to put an end to it. Did you think it would all go away without consequences? I broke the silence, and her body shuddered at the sound of my voice. You took away everything I loved about you. And now you want me to understand your reasons? She didn't answer. There was no despair in her eyes, only an attempt to justify herself. It was funny, and at the same time painful. Tell me why, I asked, my anger coming through every word. Why did you do it? Why did you betray me? You knew that I was doing everything for you, for us, but it wasn't enough for you? She slowly raised her eyes and tried to speak, but I wasn't listening. I didn't want to hear her excuses anymore. I had given up all hope of restoring that loyalty. I thought you could be changed, I continued, my words now ruthless, but you showed your true nature. The part of you that never loved me. She opened her mouth again, but no words came out. I could see it on her face, every expression on her face said that she no longer had the strength to fight for it. We stood in the room, and I began to feel the weight of the breakup consume me. I was still struggling with my own emotions, but I was firmly convinced that this was the end. The end of our union, the end of my hope that she would come back to me. Catherine, I don't want to live a lie anymore. I don't want you around me knowing what you've done. I don't believe in you anymore. You've ruined everything. She couldn't hold back any longer and started to cry. Her tears were streaming down her face, but they didn't matter anymore. I could see her despair, but it was not an emotion I had ever taken as proof of love. It was just a pathetic act, and she knew it. I don't love you anymore, I said, feeling my heart beat with every word. It was hard, but necessary. I'm sorry, but you are a stranger to me. You are not my woman, not my love. I don't want to live with you anymore. She took steps toward me, but I took a step back, standing aside. It wasn't her anymore, it was just a shell trying to hold me. I heard her tearing up, her tears dripping onto the floor. I didn't look at her, because I knew that if I did, it would be another illusory moment when I might feel doubt. But this time I was determined. Pack your things and go, I said quietly, and that was it. My determination came through every word and I had no desire to look at her anymore. I stood there watching her leave, gathering my things, trying to hold myself together, but it didn't matter anymore. She had no right to be a part of my life anymore. All those years we had spent together were just an illusion. Now I was ready to face a new life without her. And although there was still pain in my heart from the betrayal, I knew one thing, I would not let her control me anymore. I had lost her, but I had also found myself. You are no longer mine, Catherine. And I will not be yours anymore.